Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week on MMA Junkie, we take you on a quick spin through the week's big talking points in this crazy sport of MMA. I'm Simon Head. I'm in England, and yes, it's raining. But fear not, bringing sunshine to proceedings are the three amigos of Las Vegas, Nevada. John Morgan, Gorgeous George, and Goes are with me, and we got a ton of stuff to talk about on this week's show. So, guys, let's just get straight after it. Rafael dos Anjos and Paul Felder served up an absolute cracker of a main event at UFC Fight Night 182 at the UFC Apex on Saturday night. RDA got the split decision win on his return to the lightweight division as he bids to become a two-time UFC lightweight champion. But with the 55 division looking absolutely rammed right now, should we be considering him as one of the top contenders as we head into 2021? It is a packed division at 55. Give us your take, guys. We'll put 3 minutes on the clock to kick things off. And John, you can kick us off.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough one, right? Because I don't want to be disrespectful. I mean, RDA does have that pedigree, as you said, a previous UFC champion before, so that deserves some respect just as it is. And I thought the performance was great. I mean, obviously, Paul Felder deserves a ton of credit for what he did on short notice, but let's not take away from RDA as well. I mean, he changes to, from southpaw to orthodox, from wrestler to striker. I mean, everything is switched up. Everything he was prepared for was changed. And so, he dealt with that as well, and he deserves credit for that. So he is a contender, but that division is stacked, man. There's so many big fights to make right now. Assuming we get Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier on January 23rd, then that kind of rules out Conor for right now. And, he said that's a fight that he would like, but you never know how often he's going to fight. Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson looks like maybe a fight that could happen. Those guys are certainly up at the top as well. But you do have names like Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Dan Hooker that would all make great matchups and would be a next step. So he is a contender, but I just don't think you can say top contender when there's so many names in the mix.
Yeah, there's just so much strength and depth at 55, George. Where would you sort of slot him in as our resident rankings guru?
Well, I think he made a statement, man, on Saturday. I loved, the win, the quality of the opposition, top 10 guy in Paul Felder. And he was pretty dominant. Like John said, he covered all that. Wrestling, striking, conditioning, he looked great. And he hasn't been one of these guys that kind of took a break from the sport for 2 years or went out and did other stuff. He was just busy in another division where he got this close to being the interim welterweight champ. So the man's put in work, and I think some of that resume should work for him as he moves back to his original weight class. So I would say, yes, he is a top contender. If Conor and Poirier are going to go for the vacant, if Khabib stays retired, then I could see RDA probably being in that next wave. Chandler or Ferguson, if they're matched up, then they better impress because RDA made a statement. I think he's right on their heels.
Yeah, it's really hard to find an obvious dance partner for him, Goes. Have you got one in mind?
Well, it's kind of tough, guys, because really, like John said earlier, he is a contender, but not a top contender. And when you have that list of those guys, I mean, even like a Dan Hooker, who I kind of felt was in that position before, he would be a guy that's outside looking in. That's where RDA is at right now. So really what you got to do is you got to take a page out of Paul Felder's book. You got to be ready, and you need a little bit of lady luck on your side as well, because if you can't get something like that, it's a long road. And you got to go back to 2017 for you to find some sort of streak with RDA. You have to be consistent in that division. You have to work your way up, and that's almost impossible to do. So really, I think he's going to need luck. Just stay ready and maybe have one of those opportunities where you could slip in. But I have him right there in that Oliveira Hooker range, one of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, one thing's for sure. We've got one, maybe two more contenders in that 155 division. Don't rule out Paul Felder making a bit of a run at 55. He seems to have his mojo back once again. Great performance from him, albeit in defeat on Saturday night. Thursday night, so guys, are Bellator nights these days. And this past week saw the promotion's featherweight Grand Prix kick back into gear once again with the main event, seeing Patricio Pitbull knocking out Pedro Carvalho to retain the 145-pound title and move into the semi-finals. Pitbull's win once again showed what a force he is inside the Bellator cage, and many are starting to wonder how he might do against some of the best 145-pounders from the UFC if they ever were to match up. So how do you guys assess this? How would he do if he ended up in there with the best of the UFC's 145-pounders? And who do you think would beat him if all matchups were possible? We'll do 3 minutes once again on the clock. And George, you can lead us off.
All right, look, I don't want to give you some generic answer, but I think I'm going to have to. First, let me just say Pitbull and AJ McKee are outstanding featherweights, and any one of them on any night could become a real world champion if they were to fight the actual champ or the champion in the UFC who's regarded as the number one guy at 145 pounds. That's Alex Volkanovski. These guys bring it. But the question is about Pitbull. He's the current champ. He's their champ over at Bellator. That guy's got knockout power. He can touch anyone's chin and put him out. So I think he actually measures up very good against Alex Volkanovski. Kind of more of the squattier, compact guys with a lot of power, a lot of experience in big name fights. I'd love to see that one, by the way. But I feel like, the road to the title is what makes things complicated for a lot of these guys. And if he were to have to come over to the UFC and fight his way up like other featherweights, I think he'd run into some troubles with some of the longer guys, some of the guys that might have that reach and experience, Ortega, Holloway, Cater, that long frame. So, that's my 2 cents. Sorry.
What do you reckon, Goes? It's such a packed division at 145 in the UFC. Where would he slot in, do you think?
I mean, I think he'd have success overall in the UFC, but I don't know that he'd come in and wreck shop. I mean, he'd be involved in probably a lot of good battles. I don't think any of these would really end that early. It's a division filled with badasses. So, like George said, surprisingly, I kind of agree with him. I think that he would give the champion a run for his money, but I think guys a little bit further down the line might give him some problems. I really just think it turns into a stylistic type thing. I think Max Holloway would give him a lot of problems. I think Calvin Kattar would probably give him a lot of problems, but it just so happens that he matches up well with the champion. So I think if he matched up with a lot of those guys, he'd do fairly well, but coming over and wrecking shop the way he's doing in Bellator, I don't see that happening.
John, it's such an interesting one. Even in Bellator, I mean, it's not absolutely given that he's going to come out of this tournament with the belt. So how do you rate him in the global 145-pound hierarchy, if you like?
Yeah, in the MMA Junkie rankings, we have him at number 4 in the world. And to be honest with you, man, I think that's an accurate ranking of where he sits, man. I think he could contend with anybody. And as was alluded to, I think the matchup with Alexander Volkanovski is actually, I don't want to say a favorable one. I mean, Volkanovski's a force, but it's a good one. I do wonder, how he would fare against the likes of a Max Holloway, as was mentioned as well. The range, could prove a little bit problematic. But of course, we've seen Pitbull get it done in 2 divisions. So overall, man, I think the guy is capable of competing with anybody on his best day, no question about it. If he came to the UFC, I think, if he was slotted into a number 1 contender fight or a title fight, I would not count against him. Could he do it over a length of time? It is tough. I mean, obviously that featherweight division in the UFC is stacked with killers from top to bottom. But as far as where Pitbull ranks, I'm telling you, he could compete with absolutely anybody in the division. He is that good.
Yeah, one of the best 45s in the world, and it'll be interesting to see who he ends up. How he does in the semis, and if he gets through, who he'll face in the final. And we will find out who gets into the final this week, because this week is absolutely stacked. We've got UFC 255 coming up this weekend. On Saturday, though, 2 title fights at flyweight, men's and women's titles on the line at 125 pounds. A pretty strong looking card top to tail as well, guys. The 2 title fights, very different matchups. You've got Davison Figueiredo trying to register his first title defense. Valentina Shevchenko looking to just continue stamping her dominance on her respective division. Which of those 2 title fights offers the most intrigue for you going into the weekend? And how do you see both of those fights panning out? Will we see either championship change hands on Saturday night, or will it be and still on both sides of the coin? We'll put 2 minutes on the clock, and Goes, lead us off.
I feel like this is going to be and still for both of them, but the fight that I'm most intrigued with is the Valentina Shevchenko fight, because I want to see how somebody who's been this dominant for so long can bounce back from a major injury like that. Is she going to show signs of who she used to be? I'm pretty sure she will. And it's also an important fight, because really the person that she's chasing is Amanda Nunes. And that matchup is floating away, because it seems like Amanda doesn't have that much left in her career. So if Valentina Shevchenko wants another shot at that, she's going to have to do a lot and make up for some lost time. So I think it's going to be a fun matchup, and I think it's going to be a lot tougher than she anticipates, but I think she'll get the job done.
What do you reckon, John? It's two very contrasting matchups this weekend.
Yeah, it really is. I'm going to have to say I do favor both champions to retain their belts as well, but the one I'm most intrigued by is probably Deiveson Figueiredo. Still looking to establish himself as a dominant champion, just earned the title, and obviously had the controversy around it. I think the guy's the real deal, but he's still trying to develop a reputation. So for that reason, I'm probably most intrigued by that, and I do believe he's facing a tough matchup as well. With Shevchenko, I am ready to watch. I feel like it's watching a Demetrius Johnson fight back in the day, right? You don't necessarily feel that the challenger has a lot of chances in there, but you're excited to see such greatness in their prime. So that's what I like about Shevchenko.
What do you reckon, George? Which one are you looking most forward to?
I think the Figueiredo fight's going to be the more competitive of the two, and I'm looking forward to that one because I really love Figueiredo's explosion, his athleticism, and I want to see what he can do to possibly revive the 125-pound weight class. But make no mistake, Valentina just reminds me of the early 90s when I would tune into a Tyson fight just to see how long it would take for the destruction to take place and how it would take place. And Goes touched on an interesting point. It's got to be a statement win if she wants to campaign for some sort of a mid-2021 third matchup versus Amanda Nunes, because, yes, that window's starting to close.
Yeah, interesting to see how both of those champions get on Saturday night. But before we settle in for the UFC, we've got Bellator 253 on Thursday night in Uncasville. The main event seeing AJ McKee and Darian Caldwell looking to punch their ticket to the $1 million featherweight Grand Prix final and a shot at that featherweight title. The big question, of course, is which man will progress and make it into that final? Will it be the seasoned former bantamweight champion Caldwell, or will it be the undefeated super prospect McKee? Give us your early fight week takes, guys. Let us know what you reckon. John, we'll put 2 minutes on the clock and you can lead us off.
Listen, I love this matchup a lot, man. I've been high on AJ McKee from the very beginning. I happened to be at his second professional fight, covering that live, and you could just see that he was something special. And, man, he has continued to develop and really get pressed. This is going to be another test. He has not faced anybody that the wrestler that Darian Caldwell is. So, I mean, this will be another kind of measuring stick to find out if AJ McKee is as good as we think he is. I personally believe he is. I think he gets past this test. But I don't think it's anything that you can just take as an assumption. I think it is absolutely a test, and I look forward to him and Pitbull facing off in the finals in what could be a very, very special matchup. So I'm leaning McKee. I love it. I think he's special, but this is no gimme fight with Darian Caldwell, that's for sure.
You in agreement with that, George? You leaning towards McKee, or do you think the more seasoned guy in Caldwell is going to get it done?
Caldwell has that experience of being a champion, and he's fought some big fights. But AJ McKee really is something special. I liken him towards what we used to think of Fedor, someone outside of the UFC, mythical. Is he that good? Yeah, he really is. Cyborg, same thing. By the time she finally got to the UFC, we had painted her, on this huge stage and this awesome fighter that would we ever see her, and we got to. Same thing, Ben Askren, undefeated. What is he like? He had won titles in 2 different leagues, and we finally got to see. I think AJ McKee's right up there with him. I think he's gonna win. I think it's gonna be tough because Caldwell's a tough wrestler, but I think it will be him and eventually, I guess, Pitbull in the finals.
You joining your 2 colleagues, Goes, or are you going the other way?
I have to, man. I mean, anybody that's been around AJ McKee can just see this is almost destiny for him. The guy's always prepared, and the guys that surround him, especially his father, that whole team at the Body Shop, those guys will not allow you to make mistakes because you're so prepared. But Darian Caldwell is tough. I think this is going to be the toughest matchup AJ's had to face, and I think it's going to come down to that pace. It's going to be a grueling pace, but I got AJ winning.
Yeah, it's going to be great fun, and I just love the featherweight tournament. I hope Bellator introduce more of them heading into 2021. It sounds like they're going to. So watch the skies for news on that on MMA Junkie in the coming days and weeks. And finally, guys, arguably the most intriguing matchup booked between now and the end of 2020 is the December 19th bout between established welterweight contender Leon Edwards and the breakout star of 2020, Khamzat Chimaev. Chatting to MMA Junkie's Mike Bond, Edwards said that the UFC has made a major error booking their rising star to face him so early in his career, and that he'll prove the UFC wrong by handing Chimaev his first career defeat. So to finish things off this week, guys, I'd love to know your takes on that matchup. And if you want to throw in a way too early fight pick while you're at it, you can be my guest. We'll do 2 minutes on this one. And George, you get first go.
Yeah, we've seen this a lot, with somebody that just rises through the ranks quickly and then either they get checked or I guess they become the guy or the gal. With Chimaev, it's man, when you fight in succession like that, that's when you can make that big splash, especially when you're so dominant. He was dominant on the ground, and then he showed us some hands in his last fight. That said, I think people are forgetting Leon Edwards and the beast of a run that he's on. Off an 18-month wait, I don't like that too much, but still, that is Leon Edwards, one of the top welterweights who's seen a lot, and I think he might be too much right now for Khamzat Chimaev. If I get proven wrong, all right, I'll take it. But I still think Edwards is too much and too well-rounded and too experienced.
What do you reckon, Goes? You going with Rocky or are you going with the Wolf?
I think I'm going to have to go Rocky, guys. I mean, look, my gut tells me the Wolf, but here's the thing. I mean, if you just look at the stats, Leon Edwards, he does great against everyone, and really he's only fallen to some of the tough competition that the toughest competition the UFC has to offer. So it just doesn't really make sense, I think, to go with the Wolf based on a couple performances here and there. This is a very tough guy that a lot of people don't want to fight. I just hope that it does happen, and if it does, I think Leon Edwards is going to win it. I think it's going to be a big test for the Wolf.
John, you're the only one of us to have actually been cage side or close enough to see both these guys live in person. You've seen them both. Which one do you reckon's got the edge?
Love the fight. I'm going to lean towards Chimaev. I just think that grappling game that he's got and aggression is going to be a little bit too much for Leon Edwards. But I will say this, Leon is game. I am not counting him out of this fight at all. He is a live underdog. And I hate that he has to take this fight, but I do love the opportunity, man. If Leon can get this done, think about it. Everybody was passing him over. You're not a big enough draw. You don't deserve this, blah, 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 blah. If he says, hey, man, I went out there and beat the boogeyman that none of you guys wanted. What's up now? Big opportunity for him.
Yeah, he wins that fight. They have to give him a title shot next, surely, after the tricky time he's had. Guys, that's all we have on this week's show. But big thank you, as always, to Gorgeous George, to Goes, and to John Morgan over there in Las Vegas. We will keep you covered all week long, as usual, on MMA Junkie. Wall-to-wall coverage. Bellator 253 on Thursday night. UFC 255 on Saturday night. We'll keep you bang up to date throughout yet another absolutely packed fight week. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the fights, and we'll be back next